And Charlie mentioned Mark Milley. Here's what Donald Trump said about Joint Chiefs Chairman Mark Milley after The Atlantic profiled Milley in a piece last week where he detailed how he had to protect the Constitution from the former president. The revelations coming days before Milley is set to retire as the country's top military officer. Trump spent Friday intensifying his attacks, denouncing Milley for the U.S. troop withdrawal against Afghanistan, while also taking on Milley's record and suggesting that General would have been put to death for communications with China. The communications Trump seems to be referencing to are reports that Milley called his Chinese counterpart after Trump lost the 2020 election to say he would warn China should Trump decide to launch a military attack. Meanwhile, in that same Atlantic piece, Milley also recounted an instance in 2019 where Trump reportedly told him that a wounded soldier should be banned from public appearances. At the ceremony, wounded Army Captain Luis Avila, who suffered multiple injuries, including losing a leg in an IED attack in Afghanistan and 2 heart attacks, sang "God Bless America." Milley said Trump asked him afterwards why he brought, quote, people like that to the White House.
Well, and that is in line with, obviously, what we also heard from other generals who work with Donald Trump. It is sick. It's also,
he's a sick man.
It's also sick, of course, that he said that people who died in wars were losers. I mean, this is what he's done. So, Katty K, of course, it begs the question. These polls suggest that like half of America is supporting a guy who says this about wounded warriors, who says he wants to terminate the Constitution.
Cruel, sick, and corrupt.
Who says the chairman of the Joint Chiefs should have been executed for telling China we're not going to attack them, to just not worry about it, that steals nuclear secrets, that steals war plans for invasions of Iran, who a judge in New York State says that he raped a woman. You can go on and on and on. This is what we're dealing with, though. And I will say, for those Democrats who are concerned about political strategy, when you're running against that,
focus on that.
I'm not sure you should be talking so much about GDP growth rates and let nerds like me do that. I'm not so sure you should be talking about trying to convince people how well the economy's doing in their lives when they're not buying that, but instead talk about what you're running against. And I think, again, that's what I'm hearing from Democrats in Washington.
Yeah, I mean, look, the White House has been super careful about not wanting Joe Biden to talk about the legal cases, the president talk about those legal cases, and that's understandable. He's trying to make a distinction between the previous administration and his own administration and give Merrick Garland all the autonomy that the DOJ is rightly due, but there's plenty of material there. And actually, when you look at these polls, there's also plenty of wiggle room, it seems, within still the Republican Party. There are 35% of Republicans who are diehard Trump supporters, but that's a lot left who are prepared to take a second look at another candidate, or would seem to be prepared to take a second look at another candidate for all of those kinds of reasons. Like, I mean, we've all had the conversations with people in the Pentagon, in the military, who were dismayed when the first reports came out about the kinds of things that Donald Trump said to John Kelly, about his son who had died, and why do people give their lives? I just don't understand it. Or what he said about John McCain being taken prisoner of war. Now, for the diehards of Trump supporters, that makes no difference. They still love him anyway. But there are those Republicans who are prepared to look somewhere else. It's just this primary season doesn't seem to have produced a viable yet alternative candidate to Donald Trump. So we're looking again at that Trump-Biden matchup, which polls suggest many Americans feel discouraged by. On the economy, I think you're right. I mean, the bigger threat I would have thought to Joe Biden at the moment is not so much the age question, but the Federal Reserve saying they're going to keep interest rates high for the next 2 years, potentially the auto workers' strike. There are economic clouds on the horizons that could be damaging to the president, and I think he's got to be careful to tie himself just to the message of Bidenomics.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of economists now believing that interest rates are going to continue up into next year, the election season. Michael Beschloss, before we let you go, I'd love to hear what your read is. Obviously, somebody who's closely followed American history through the years. What your take is on basically, if you agree with NBC poll and most other polls, that we have a deadlocked race between Joe Biden and a guy who's talking about the execution of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who talks about terminating the Constitution, who's stolen nuclear secrets. I could go on and on. What's your best explanation to date for that? Because I don't think we can ever stop asking ourselves enough why so many Americans would continue to support somebody that is calling for the termination of the Constitution, stealing nuclear secrets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
You couldn't be more right. You know, in the end, a year from now, what's going to be important about this election, whatever happens, is if it's Biden versus Trump, you're going to have one candidate who loves democracy, who's been an effective leader in all sorts of ways for more than half a century. That's Joe Biden. On the other side, you're going to have Donald Trump, who, this is not a hidden plan. He has told us if he is elected, he's going to institute a presidential dictatorship. He's going to suspend the rule of law by ending an independent Department of Justice. He's going to suspend a military under civilian control and with professional soldiers by saying he's going to have not a Mark Milley, but someone in the Defense Department and someone as Secretary of Defense who will follow his orders. If it's Biden versus Trump, this is going to be a choice between democracy or dictatorship. And if people vote in this election on any other basis, they're going to be making an extremely dangerous mistake.